The genesis of Sheffield. It's a tale of naivety and experimentation and fumbling and mistakes and education and finally we learned something. We started making some pretty good records. It started in the mid-50s when my late dear departed friend Doug Sachs introduced me to high-end and very high-quality audio. I had never heard a fine sound system in a home. I didn't know anything about that. And we began listening to recordings, making comparisons. We found that we were very much enamored with some of the British product, in particular the stuff that came out on the London label, which was British Decca. And there was an enormous range of quality in these recordings. Some sounded terrific, some were okay, some were quite poor. We didn't know why there was distortion on some of these LPs, but the one thing that I did notice, being a pianist, I noticed that the sound of the piano on most modern LPs of that era was inadequate. It just didn't sound realistic to my ear. And I was trying to think, why would that be? Is it possible that there's some kind of flutter, some kind of speed fluctuation going on with the tape recorder? Because LPs were made from master tapes, and prior to that, the 78 RPM albums were made from disc masters. In many cases, the original disc was electroplated and used to manufacture. And I felt that piano recordings of the 1930s and 40s that were made direct had this realism and this warmth, this musicality, and the LPs didn't have it. What was going on? Well, Doug, my partner Doug, who became my partner at that time, has a brilliant brother. His brother Sherwood is a design engineer and knows a lot about audio and has designed equipment. He says, you may be hearing phase shift, you may be hearing a softening in the low register or something going on that has to do with the fact that highs and lows are not being recorded simultaneously. That in the playback you will hear the high frequencies just a little bit late in relationship to the low frequencies. And he said that may be something you're hearing that disturbs you. Most engineers would say that phenomenon, which is known as phase shift, that phenomenon is not audible, nothing to be concerned about. But you as musicians may be hearing this and it may be bothering you. So we did some experimentation. I said, one day we were riding down Melrose Avenue in Hollywood, California, where we lived. And I said, Doug, at the next corner is the oldest studio in Los Angeles, a place called Electrovox. They've been operating continuously since 1931, and we were now in 1959. I said, let's go in there and see. They may still be able to cut a record the old-fashioned way, with the microphone in the studio and a line that goes into the cutting room and a turntable, a cutting lathe, a cutting head can cut us a live record. Let's see. So we went in there, talked to the guys. The old man who ran the place had been there since 31, and his son had been there a few years in the mid-50s. And I said, can you still make a record the way it used to be? Are your lines still in from your control booth to your lathe room? He said, yeah, no problem. Well, what would it cost us? Because we didn't have any money. And he said, we ran a test for $10. Well, I had $5 and Doug had $5, so we chipped in our $10. And we made a test. Now, the equipment they had was antiquated at the very least. It was a 1947 cutting head RCA, a 1937 microphone, the RCA 77D. The cutting lathe, the rotating turntable and all, was from the days of early talking pictures, early sound movies. It was called a Vitaphone lathe from the year 1929. That was it. That was the equipment. So they cut us a disc. And I played the piano and I made some tests to see about long notes, see if they were steady and if they had flutter or not and all. He said, let's play it back. I said, let's not play it back, because I had a good system at home and I wanted to hear it with a light pickup and a good cartridge and all. I took it home, started fumbling with the wires because I couldn't hear anything. I had the record playing and nothing was coming through the speakers. I thought maybe I had something disconnected. Then lo and behold, out of the speaker came this extremely beautiful piano music. Beautifully clear, crystalline quality, no background noise. I couldn't believe it. I literally fell on the floor. It was so beautiful. And I realized that we were onto something. And we drew a lot of conclusions from that experiment, and they were mostly wrong conclusions, because we assumed that if we bought modern equipment, we'd get a better result. And it just so happened that all this old stuff was running right. It was in very good shape. So we booked a hot studio in LA at the time, Radio Recorders it was called, and we rented a concert grand. I was going to record the Chopin Preludes for piano. And we made a test recording, and it came back with audible rumble from the lathe, with distortion from the microphone preamp, with some hum in the system, all kinds of ills that we never thought this new equipment would have. And to make a long story short, we realized that if we were going to make records, we better have our own equipment. We better know what we're doing with good modern equipment. And we realized the reason the European recordings sounded so good is because they were recorded with a Neumann cutting head, which was the best in the business. The Americans were using a Westrex cutting head, was not so great. And we began buying equipment. First we did some experiments, and we ended up deciding it would be good to start a business, that maybe we could serve the needs of record producers that wanted good quality. They wanted to be able to transfer their master tapes to disc with fidelity to the source. And I suggested it might be a real business. And so we formed a partnership and we started the Mastering Lab, which was the first independent mastering room in the country, and had a long run right up till Doug's death last April. The business was still running and serving the needs of the top producers. And having the equipment enabled us to make records direct as we thought we would like to, and as we did. And we ended up recording the Los Angeles Philharmonic with Eric Leinsdorf conducting. I did several albums of pop instrumental music. I arranged it in such a way as to show off the virtues of the system, the dynamic range, the immediacy, the impact, the true-to-life kind of percussive impact of a lot of the music. We recorded Harry James and his big band. This was one of the swing era bands, and one of the great bands. We did a demo with drummers playing improvised solos, which became very popular for people who wanted to sample drum sounds. We did a couple of albums with Amanda McBroom, the singer-songwriter, the woman who wrote The Rose. All in all, several dozen albums, all done direct to disc.